The NFC South is home to the reigning Super Bowl champions. So let's talk about Bruce Arians, Sean Payton, as the rest of the coaches from the NFC South with SI fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. And Fabs, you went through all 32 teams, head coaches, offensive coordinators, and how their play calling will impact fantasy football players for 2021. So let's start with the Super Bowl champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What can we expect from a Bruce Arians-led offense?
Well, first off, let's just let folks know that Arians' system, and remember, he's been an OC and a head coach for a long time in the NFL, has combined 16 top 24 fantasy finishes among wide receivers, including 6 top 10s. Now let's get to the here and now, or at least last season, the most recent offense that Arians has produced. Mike Evans was the wide receiver 11. Chris Godwin was the wide receiver 31, although he missed time due to injuries. And from a points per game basis, he was a wide receiver 15. That was much better. But we have to keep in mind that Antonio Brown didn't play for the first 8 games last season. He served a suspension. When he came back, the numbers between this trio, very interesting to see, and how Arians used all 3 of these talented wide receivers. So let's look at the distribution in those 8 games between Evans, Godwin, and AB. Evans actually led all 3 of those wide receivers with 7.9 targets and 17.4 fantasy points per game. Strangely enough, Evans averaged more fantasy points with AB than without him. So take that for what it is. Brown was actually second in targets at 7.8. He was third in points at 14.6 per game. Godwin was third in targets at 6.9, but second in points at 15.8. This may sound confusing, so I'll break it down for you pretty simply. All 3 of these players were very productive from a fantasy perspective, and Antonio Brown is going far, far later in drafts than either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. So AB could end up being the wide receiver you want to target in fantasy drafts because he's going to be much cheaper, and he wasn't that far off in terms of production when compared to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, at least from a points per game average, it was very close.
Let's take a look at a historically powerhouse offense. That's Sean Payton's group down in New Orleans. Now we know Drew Brees is no longer under center there, but still, we expect a lot of big time point scoring plays from anyone that is going to play under Sean Payton.
Right. And so, we know what Alvin Kamara is going to bring to the table. We know what we hope Michael Thomas will bring to the table. But what about the tight end position? Sean Payton's offense has produced a combined 6 top 10 fantasy tight ends, right? That's pretty good. The offense is fantasy friendly. Now, 3 of those came from Jimmy Graham, 2011, 2013, and 2014. He was an absolute beast back in the day. But Jared Cook also was a top 10 tight end in 2019. Ben Watson in 2015. Jeremy Shockey when Payton was the OC for the Giants in 2002. Now, that's good news for Adam Troutman, who is one of my favorite deep sleepers among tight ends. This is a guy who should see a greater target share, right? Emmanuel Sanders is no longer on the roster. Jared Cook is no longer on the roster. You've got Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith, and a mishmash of wide receivers. And Troutman, who played his college days at Dayton, is a very good pass catcher who could emerge as maybe the third option in terms of throwing the football for Jameis Winston. This is going to be a guy that you're going to want to watch during the preseason and training camp. And once again, a very nice late round pick because this offense has been tight end friendly.
Whoa, we have a deep sleeper alert. Michael Fabiano dropping Adam Troutman as one of his favorite deep sleepers for 2021. Let's stick with the tight end position. This guy is not a sleeper. He was drafted 4th overall in the NFL draft. Tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. That's Kyle Pitts. Now that Arthur Smith is the head coach in Atlanta, what can we expect out of the rookie out of Florida?
Everything has lined up for Pitts to have maybe one of the top 2 or 3 best rookie seasons of all time from a tight end. And typically, Bill, this, rookie tight ends don't do much. And that's just been the case. Even some of the greats like Shannon Sharp, Tony Gonzalez, they didn't put up huge numbers during their rookie campaign. But Arthur Smith is what? An offensive coach who coached tight ends during his career in Tennessee. And during his time in Tennessee, Delaney Walker was prominently used in the offense. Of course, we know Jonnu Smith was also utilized in the offense before he ultimately signed with the Patriots. And Pitts is in a situation now where he could end up being the number 2 option for Matt Ryan because Julio Jones is now with the Titans, ironically, right? So Pitts is a guy who I have ranked fifth, and I don't think I've ever had a rookie tight end ranked this high. And maybe I'm bananas, I don't know, but because the trend has not been good, but he is a generational talent in an offense that's going to force feed him the football. And with Julio Jones and his 160 plus targets per game average now in Tennessee, Kyle Pitts could see 100 plus targets in this offense easily. And when you see that many opportunities as a tight end in a league that doesn't have a lot of greats at the position, you've got a shot to be pretty special.
Let's finish up our NFC South discussion by talking about the Carolina Panthers. They have a new quarterback in Sam Darnold. We know that Joe Brady gets one of his most explosive weapons back with Christian McCaffrey. What can we expect out of this Panthers offense in 2021?
Teddy Bridgewater last season didn't put up huge numbers, but he was the QB 18. And I remember having him as a stardom several weeks and stardom and sit him because the matchups were good and Teddy Bridgewater delivered. And when you look overall at the offense that Brady put on the field, it was very fantasy friendly. I mentioned Bridgewater was the QB 18. Of course, Mike Davis was one of the top running backs in fantasy football. He was in the top 12. He had 3 wide receivers in the top 36. I mean, that typically does not happen. And let's also keep in mind, he threw the ball 59% of the time last year. Maybe that's going to change because Christian McCaffrey will be back. I get it. But remember, Brady was the architect behind the LSU's explosive offense with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in 2019. He likes to throw the football. What does all this mean? This is good news for Sam Darnold, right? Sam Darnold's a guy who I feel like didn't get a fair shake in New York, okay? The weapons were never there. Adam Gase, I'm sorry, he was a terrible head coach and offensive coordinator anytime he wasn't having Peyton Manning under center. It's just it's the absolute truth, right? So now you have Joe Brady, who knows how to develop a quarterback and get the best out of him. He got the best out of Bridgewater. I think he'll get the best out of Darnold. I'm not saying Sam Darnold's going to have a breakout season, but folks, at the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if Darnold were a pretty solid QB2 and a guy who ends up getting picked up off the waiver wire in leagues because right now, Bill, he's not getting drafted in too many places.
We'll see a resurgence of Sam Darnold now that he's with a new team in Carolina. Fabs, you did a breakdown of every head coach and offensive coordinator, all 32 of them. They're grouped by division. It's all up on Sports Illustrated right now. Check it out. Really important stuff if you're trying to win your fantasy football league in 2021. Go to si.com/fantasy.